Islamic expert claims that the exclusion from the recent peace talks between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front contributed to the Sabah standoff. To shed light on this issue, we have in our studio this morning Professor Julkipli Wadi, Dean of the University of the Philippines Institute of Islamic Studies. Good morning, Professor Wadi.
Good morning, Ami.
So we'll start with the history that we are already pretty well versed by now about how the Sultanate of Sulu was able to get Sabah, and then that Malaysia is paying them 5,300 ringgit per year as lease, although Malaysia interprets it differently. And in the 1960s, there was an attempt, or at least the Sultanate of Sulu asked help from the Philippine government to negotiate on their behalf in order for them to reclaim Sabah.
Right.
What has happened since then? Why did we not renew it? Or it seems like we haven't really been very active in resolving that particular issue.
I think it's not that the Philippine government at the time didn't renew it. But I think, remember 1962, it was just a year before 1963, which was the independence of Malaysia. And at that time, there was already the plan to include Sabah in the Federation of Malaysia, like Sarawak, Singapore, and others. And I think there was also insistence of the Philippine government to bring the case to the to the UN or to the ICJ. But the Malaysian government was adamant on its position that it didn't want to internationalize the issue, so that the inclusion of Sabah in the federation even angered, I think, Indonesia. If my memory was right, I mean, even President Sukarno and President I think Macapagal at that time didn't recognize the inclusion of Sabah in the Federation of Malaysia. I remember that was during Macapagal time also. So there was, I think, a halt in the engagement between the Philippines and Malaysia. It was not moving forward. That's why when Marcos came, Marcos being adventurous enough, he had his own plan. Since Malaysia did not want to, resolve the issue diplomatically, so Marcos, had that plot, the so-called Operation Merdeka, and which was bungled and eventually resulted into what we refer to as the Jabida massacre. Yes.
And then since then, we haven't really been discussing much about it. So, as an authority on Islamic culture, sir, what do you propose that the government should do?
I think we did not discuss that because of the sensitivity of the issue. Because what happened was, after the Jabida massacre, Malaysia reversed the direction of the struggle of the Philippines against Malaysia. It created the Moro National Liberation Front, even trained Nur Misuari in Malaysia. So therefore, the struggle was redirected from Mindanao against the Philippine government. And it had to, what you call this, the martial law was declared to somehow contain the Moro rebellion. And there was an initial patching up of the relationship between the Philippines and Malaysia. Now, I think that was the reason why the Philippines was not as, I would say, serious in talking with Malaysia as far as the Sabah issue is concerned, because it doesn't want to hurt RP-Malaysia relation. And during Cory's time, there were some effort to really patch up the issue. Then Ramos came. I think there were again negotiations to put up foundations, etc., etc. In other words, the priority of the government was really the relationship, the forging of the relationship between Malaysia and the Philippine government.
You mentioned also in an earlier interview that the government should have accorded the royal family appropriate recognition, but you clarified this and you mentioned that you were talking about creative ways to utilize traditional testaments. Sentiments. Yes.
Well, I'm referring to the fact that the peace process should indeed be comprehensive to embrace even possibilities of utilizing what I call indeed traditional sentiments, including institutions like the Sultanates. Because if it would appear that the framework agreement is just a deal between the government and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and there will be many stakeholders, including critical institutions that will be isolated in the process, I'm afraid we will just be haunted again and again by such an issues like Sabah claim, even after the formations of the Bangsamoro in 2016 or even thereafter. So I look at the issue of this standoff as an opportunity for the government to broaden its understanding or even its framing of the Mindanao conflict, and see the possibility of how can it be utilized or integrated in the new framework of the Bangsamoro at a time that we are just actually just chiseling or crafting the draft law. So in other words, we have lots of time to do this. Just as possibly we cannot wash hands and say this is a domain of foreign policy. This is not something the area of like the office of the presidential assistance on the peace process, right? But you are actually just closing the door if that is your argument. Our point is let's be creative this time so that we'll not be haunted by the same issue again and again in the future.
And then lastly, Professor Wadi, what do you think should still be done to prevent the Sultanate to resort to drastic actions?
I think what must be done is a clear statements or policy from Malacanang, given the fact that we have seen the calibrated effort of Malaysia not to treat harshly the people behind the standoff. I think it has to be reciprocated in a way that Malacanang would also do the same, so that we'll be able to emerge victorious out of this in terms of able to craft win-win solutions, like the creative ways I'm saying earlier. In the first place, this is a group that has its own cause, that has its own historic rights, and therefore I think there are many ways by which we could accord them just recognition, and even ways of how we can sort of give them certain relevance. Say in Malaysia, their Sultanate is part of the political system. If Malaysia can do that, why can't we do it in the Bangsamoro? That's why we need that creative ways, what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Julkipli Wadi. He's the Dean of the UP University of the Philippines Institute of Islamic Studies. Thank you so much, sir.